Before we start the story, please tell us where you're watching from by leaving a comment below. If you like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Have a great day. Enjoy the story, everyone. Evan Harper had never had a romantic moment with a woman. At 28, he had $500 million and could buy almost anything except the ability to look a pretty woman in the eye without feeling nervous. Everything changed with a contract on his desk about surrogate services. This document was meant to help create an heir for the Harper family. His parents had arranged this before leaving for a 6-month trip across Europe, while Evan was busy with a big software launch. Now, someone was coming to his door. The sound of his private elevator made Evan's heart race. He stood still in his home office, surrounded by the blue light of computer screens. His fingers, usually steady when typing, shook as he reached for his coffee mug. It slipped from his grip and shattered on the floor, making a loud noise that felt like an end to his solitude. "Darn," he muttered, his voice rough from too many video calls over the past month. His company ran smoothly because of his great team and automated systems, but his time alone had become more intense since his parents left. The elevator chimed again, and he heard footsteps approaching. The sound was soft and graceful on the marble floor. The building's concierge was supposed to announce visitors, but the contract had allowed for this visit without the usual rules. "Mr. Harper!" a warm voice called out. It was rich and soothing, with a hint of nervousness that made Evan's heart tighten. "I'm Laya Bennett. I believe your parents arranged for me to come." Laya Bennett was the name from the contract, the woman meant to help him become a parent. Evan shut his eyes, battling the fear that was starting to take over. His therapist had said this day would come when his parents would stop accepting his reasons for being focused on work. He just hadn't thought it would be like this. "Mr. Harper," she said again, her voice getting closer. "I know this is unusual, but maybe we could talk. I came all the way from Brooklyn in this storm." Something in her tone, a mix of determination and kindness, made Evan open his eyes. He peeked through the small gap in his office door and saw her for the first time. She was stunning, standing there like someone out of a painting, bringing warmth into the cold atmosphere of his office. Her natural hair framed her face beautifully, and her gentle smile showed a hint of shyness. Her expressive brown eyes seemed full of life. She wore a simple black dress that fit her well. Even when she shifted nervously, Evan felt a strange excitement. "I know you're here," Laya said softly, placing a small purse on his coffee table. "Your parents told me you're shy. I want you to know that I'm not here to judge you or push you into anything you're not ready for." Evan leaned against the wall, wishing he could just vanish. How was he supposed to talk to this woman? How could he look at her without feeling awkward? How could he explain that even though he had a lot of money, he'd never even held hands with anyone before, let alone met the expectations of his family? "I have the contract here," Laya said, taking out a folder from her bag. "It is for a 6-month arrangement with some expectations, but honestly, I'd prefer to talk first and get to know each other a bit before we think about the details." She moved further into his living room, and Evan watched as she looked around. The simple furniture, the big windows showing Central Park, and the lack of personal details made the place feel empty. Her expression was curious, which somehow made him feel more uncomfortable. "I studied literature at Columbia," she said casually, as if she were talking to a friend rather than to an empty room. "I love books, rainy days, and silly romantic movies. I'm probably the only person in New York who still writes in a journal instead of everything on a computer." Despite his nerves, Evan found himself leaning closer to the door. Her voice was soothing, pulling him in even when he wanted to hide. "I'm also having a tough time financially," Laya said with a soft laugh. "My mother is very sick, and the medical bills are a lot for us to handle. The agreement offers enough money to help her, which is why I'm here, Mr. Harper. I'm just a student in need of help." Her honesty hit Evan hard. She wasn't here because she wanted to be, but because she had to be, just like he was hiding because he felt it was necessary. Taking a shaky breath, Evan stepped away from the wall. His reflection in the window showed him what Laya would see if he showed himself. A tall man with messy hair wearing an old t-shirt and jeans. He looked like what he was, a millionaire who had forgotten how to engage with others. "Miss Bennett," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Laya turned toward him, her face lighting up with relief and perhaps real joy. "There you are. Please call me Laya." Evan moved into the doorway but stayed there, gripping the frame for support. When their eyes met, he felt a spark between them that had nothing to do with the contract, but everything to do with the way she looked at him, not with pity, but with simple warmth. "This is scary," Evan admitted, the words slipping out before he could hold them back. Laya smiled, and it changed her whole face. "For both of us," she agreed. "But maybe we could be scared together over dinner. I noticed you have a nice kitchen that looks unused." Despite everything, Evan felt himself smile for possibly the first time in months. "I mostly order takeout," he confessed. "Perfect," Laya said, walking toward the kitchen confidently. "I love to cook. Why don't you tell me what you like to eat, and I'll see what I can make with what you have." As Evan watched Laya open his sparkling stainless steel refrigerator and take out ingredients he had forgotten about, he understood that his life was about to change. The woman in his kitchen wasn't just here to do a job. She was here to bring him back to life. Chapter 2. Breaking the Ice. Evan couldn't sleep for 3 nights. He lay in his big bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of dinner with Laya. He remembered how she hummed while cooking, seeming so comfortable in his clean kitchen. She asked him questions about his work, his hobbies, and his dreams, treating him like he was a real person worth knowing. But the moment that stuck with him was when their hands touched. When he reached for the salt at the same time she did, their fingers brushed for a moment. That tiny touch had sent a rush through him, making him pull back so quickly that he nearly knocked over his wine glass. Laya had apologized like she had done something wrong, but Evan noticed the hint of hurt in her lovely brown eyes. Now it was Monday morning, and she was in his library. Evan stood in the doorway, like a shy teenager with a crush, trying to find the courage to walk into his own home. Through the small opening, he saw Laya curled up in his favorite reading chair, her legs tucked beneath her, totally wrapped up in a well-loved copy of Jane Eyre. She had changed from her dress into jeans and a soft cream sweater that made her look radiant, and her natural hair glowed in the morning sunlight pouring through the tall windows. She was the most beautiful thing in his quiet, lonely world. "You can come in, you know," Laya said without looking up, a small smile on her lips. "I don't bite," she added, making Evan's face flush with embarrassment for being caught staring. "I didn't want to interrupt," he said, stepping cautiously into the room that had been his private retreat for so long. "You're not interrupting," Laya said kindly, finally glancing up at him. When their eyes met, he felt that same spark from the night before. "I was just thinking about how amazing your library is. Many people with collections like this just use them for decoration." "I've read them all," Evan admitted, moving a bit closer despite feeling nervous. "Some of them multiple times." Laya's face brightened with real joy. "Really? Even the Bronte sisters?" "Especially the Bronte sisters," Evan said, surprised by his own confidence. Emily was a genius, but Charlotte understood love in a way that was groundbreaking for her time. The words poured out before he could think, and he immediately worried that Laya was just being nice and didn't want to hear a shy millionaire talk about old books. Instead of looking bored, Laya set her book down and leaned forward eagerly. "What do you think about Rochester? Is he a romantic hero or just an older man taking advantage of Jane's innocence?" For the next hour, they discussed literature with a passion that made Evan forget his shyness. Laya was not just smart. She was genuinely excited about books and ideas. She pushed him to think differently about stories he thought he knew and laughed at his dry humor in a way that made his heart feel full. "You should teach," Evan said when their conversation paused. "You have ideas that would inspire students." Laya's smile faded a little. "That's the plan. Eventually, after I finish my research and find a job, but for now—" She waved her hand vaguely, and Evan remembered why she was here: the medical bills, the 6-month contract his parents had set up, the need that had led her to respond to their ad. "How is your mother doing?" Evan asked gently. "She's being treated for stage 3 breast cancer," Laya said, her voice steady but strained. "The treatment is new and costly, but the doctors think there's a real chance of her getting better if we can keep it going." Hearing the pain in her voice made Evan's heart ache. He wished he could help her, write a check to solve everything, but he knew that would only make her feel worse about their situation. "Tell me more about her," he said. "What is she like?" Laya's face softened as she talked about her mother, a retired teacher who had raised Laya by herself and still helped with reading programs despite her illness. She worried more about Laya's future than her own health. As she spoke, Evan found himself leaning in closer, not just drawn by her words, but by the way her eyes lit up when she talked about someone she cared for. "She would really like you," Laya said suddenly. "She always says the best people are the ones who read and think deeply about what they read." Evan felt his heart race. She knows about the agreement. "Oh no," Laya giggled, a sound like chimes that made Evan feel nervous. "She thinks I am taking care of a house for a rich family while they travel." If she knew the truth, Laya shook her head. "She raised me to believe in love and waiting for the right person." This would break her heart. The admission hung between them, heavy with meaning. Evan wanted to say something kind, but he didn't trust himself. Instead, he stood up quickly and moved to the piano in the corner of the room. "Can you play?" Laya asked, watching him. "A little," Evan replied, which was a huge understatement. Music had been his escape, a way to express feelings he couldn't say out loud. He began to play a piece he had written the previous year during a lonely winter. The melody was sad yet beautiful, filled with yearning and dreams left unspoken. As he played, he lost himself in the music, forgetting Laya was there, forgetting to feel shy about sharing something so personal. The notes drifted out like a confession, telling the story of a man who had built walls so high he had forgotten how to let someone in. When the last note faded, Evan stayed still at the piano, unsure of how Laya would react. "What if she thought my music was silly?" "That was beautiful," Laya whispered. He turned to see her standing just behind him, close enough that he could catch a whiff of her warm, gentle fragrance, which made his head spin. "Did you write it?" Laya asked. Evan nodded, not trusting his voice. She was so close he could see the golden flecks in her brown eyes and the long lashes framing them. "It sounded like loneliness," she said gently, but also like hope, like someone waiting for something wonderful to happen. Their eyes met, and Evan felt the air between them crackle with energy. For just a moment, her gaze dropped to his mouth before returning to his eyes, and Evan's heart raced. She was going to lean in closer. Panic gripped him, and he suddenly stepped back, causing the piano bench to scrape across the floor. I have work to do," he stammered, almost rushing out of the room. Behind him, he heard Laya sigh, but she didn't follow. When he got to his office, Evan shut the door hard and leaned against it, breathing heavily. His whole body was shaking from that close moment, feeling a strong wish that almost took over his fear. For the rest of the day, Evan stayed in his office, feeling weak. He ordered lunch to be brought to him and only talked to Laya through clumsy text messages. Even with a door between them, he could feel her nearby, like a bright change in his carefully arranged life. That evening, when he finally came out for dinner, Laya acted like nothing had happened. She had cooked again, and the food smelled amazing. She talked easily about books, news, and everything, except for that moment by the piano when they had almost crossed a line they both were not ready to face. But Evan saw how careful she was not to touch him when she passed the dishes. He noticed how she stayed distant while they moved around the kitchen. Most of all, he noticed her sadness. She was trying to hide it behind her smile. As he lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, Evan realized he was falling for Laya Bennett. The woman his parents had hired to help him start a family was becoming someone he truly cared about. This scared him more than anything else in his carefully controlled life. Chapter 3. Walls Coming Down. "You can't live your whole life in this penthouse," Laya said on Thursday morning, standing in Evan's doorway with her hands on her hips and determination in her eyes. "When was the last time you felt real sunlight?" Evan looked up from his laptop, where he had been hiding behind his work for the past hour, trying not to think about how Laya's morning routine had become the best part of his day. He loved the way she hummed while making coffee, and how she always saved him the last piece of toast. "I get enough vitamin D from supplements," Evan replied, minimizing a video call where his CTO was giving him updates on their latest project. His company's great team had learned to work well under his remote leadership, but even they were starting to notice how distracted he had become. "Get dressed," Laya interrupted, stepping into his office with a confident stride that made his heart race. "We're going to Central Park." "I don't do parks," Evan protested, even as he felt drawn to her closeness. She was wearing a summer dress, something yellow and flowing that made her look bright and warm. "Too many people and too many things can go wrong." "Exactly," Laya smiled, and Evan felt his resolve crumbling. "You need to embrace new experiences. You need the beauty of real life." 20 minutes later, Evan found himself walking down Fifth Avenue with the most beautiful woman he had ever seen, wondering how she had convinced him to leave his comfort zone. The city was loud, with horns, construction sounds, and the smell of street food, but somehow, with Laya's hand tucked in his elbow, it felt okay. "See," Laya said as they entered the park, "the world didn't end." Evan was about to respond when Laya suddenly stopped walking, her eyes on an ice cream vendor. "Oh my gosh, it's been years since I've had a good ice cream cone. Do you want one?" Before Evan could say he avoided sugar and questionable food, Laya was already ordering 2 vanilla cones. She handed him one with such joy that Evan accepted it, even though he wasn't sure about it. "Thank you," he said, unsure of what to do with the quickly melting treat. Leela didn't hesitate. She took a long lick of her ice cream, catching a drop that was about to drip from the cone. Evan watched, captivated, as she closed her eyes and sighed with delight. "Perfect," she said. Evan nearly dropped his cone. The sound she made felt innocent, but it sent a warmth through him. He tried to take a bite of his own ice cream, but his hands were shaking so much that it was hard to hold it. "Are you okay?" Leela asked, seeing his struggle. "I'm fine," Evan replied, his voice rough. "Just not used to this." They found a bench by the lake, and for the next hour, Laya shared stories about her childhood in Detroit, her dream of teaching, and her mother's funny opinions about new books. Evan found himself laughing, something he hadn't done in months. Laya's happiness was contagious, pulling him out of his shell. "You have a beautiful laugh," Laya said suddenly, her voice soft. "You should do it more often." Evan felt a warmth in his cheeks. "I don't have much to laugh about usually." "Maybe you just need the right company," Laya suggested. When Evan looked at her, he saw her watching him in a way that made his heart skip. Dark clouds had been forming as they talked, and suddenly, rain began to pour. Visitors in the park scattered, trying to find shelter, but Evan and Laya were caught in the rain with nowhere to go. Laya grabbed his hand, pulling him toward a small pavilion a short distance away. They ran through the rain together, Laya laughing like a child, while Evan focused on her fingers holding his. By the time they reached the pavilion, they were both soaked. Laya's dress clung to her, and her hair hung down in wet strands around her face. She looked vibrant and carefree. Evan, on the other hand, felt soaked and messy. "That was amazing!" Laya exclaimed, wringing water from her hair. "I love summer storms." Evan couldn't help but watch her. The wet fabric of her dress outlined her shape, making him feel a rush of warmth. When Laya noticed him looking, her cheeks turned pink, but she didn't turn away. "You're staring," she whispered. "I'm sorry," Evan started to say. But Laya stepped closer, interrupting him. "Don't apologize," she said softly. "I like how you look at me." Evan struggled to catch his breath. They were only inches apart, so close that he could see water droplets on her eyelashes and feel the warmth from her. "Laya," he whispered, her name sounding like a secret wish. She moved even closer, rising on her toes, her face tilted up toward his. "It's okay, Evan. You can touch me." For a moment, Evan felt frozen by his feelings. Every part of him wanted to kiss her, to finally take that step they had been circling around for days. But then, doubt crept in. What if he didn't do it right? What if she saw how unsure he was? A sudden clap of thunder made them both jump, breaking the moment. Evan stepped back, running his shaking hands through his wet hair. "We should go back," he said, his voice shaky. "You'll catch cold." Disappointment flickered across Laya's face before she quickly smiled. "You might be right." The walk back to his building was quiet. Both of them were lost in their thoughts. In the elevator, Evan stood as far away from Laya as he could. He didn't trust himself to stay calm if she was too close again. But he could feel her looking at him, sensing her sadness and confusion from his earlier rejection. Back at the penthouse, Laya said she would go change into dry clothes, and Evan did the same. When they met again in the kitchen for dinner, they both acted polite, as if nothing had happened in the pavilion. "I thought I'd make pasta tonight," Laya said, trying to keep her voice light. "Something easy." "That sounds great," Evan replied, happy for the normalcy of a routine. But cooking together was hard. The kitchen made them close, and every accidental touch sent a jolt through Evan. When Laya needed something from the cabinet above him, she reached across, her leaning against him for a moment. Evan held on to the counter tightly, feeling overwhelmed. "Sorry," Laya said softly, but her voice sounded a little shaky, and Evan could see she was nervous too. The real test came when Laya was making the sauce and got some flour in her hair. Without thinking, Evan reached up to help her, his fingers getting caught in her soft curls. Laya froze at his touch, closing her eyes as if enjoying it. "Evan," she whispered, saying his name in a way that broke his focus completely. He was about to kiss her. All his thoughts disappeared as he held her face, his thumbs brushing her cheeks. Laya's lips parted in a way that invited him closer, her hands resting on his chest. Then the smoke alarm rang. They quickly pulled apart, both of them breathing fast as Laya hurried to turn off the burner where the sauce was starting to burn. Evan stood still, watching her move quickly in the kitchen, feeling the ache of wanting her. "Crisis averted," Laya said with a forced cheerfulness. But Evan noticed the hurt in her eyes. He thought about how he had almost kissed her twice that day and messed up both times. That night, Evan lay in bed replaying every moment, every touch, and every look they shared. He felt a strong desire but also feared getting too close. He was falling for Laya he already had, if he was honest, but his fear of being close was stronger than his feelings for her. Down the hall, Laya was probably awake too, wondering why the man who looked at her like she was special kept pushing her away. Evan closed his eyes, knowing tomorrow would bring more of the same confusing times when they felt a connection followed by his retreat. He felt he was too damaged to deserve someone as amazing as Laya Bennett, but deep down, he didn't want her to leave. Chapter 4. The First Touch. Evan woke up to the sound of coughing. At first he thought it was a dream. In the weeks since their rainy afternoon in Central Park, he had gotten used to Laya's soft sounds in his home, her humming in the morning, the gentle clink of dishes, the sound of pages turning while she read in his library. But this was different. It was a painful cough that seemed to hurt her. He found her in the kitchen, bent over the sink, shaking with each spasm. She was still in her pajamas, a simple white cotton set that somehow looked nice on her. But her usual grace was gone, replaced by the shaky movements of someone feeling very unwell, Laya. Evan walked over carefully, feeling his heart ache at the sight of her struggle. "Are you okay?" he asked. She turned toward him, and Evan felt worried when he saw her. Her beautiful brown eyes looked dazed from fever. Her cheeks were bright red against her dark skin. When she tried to speak, a cough took over, leaving her breathless. "I'm fine," she whispered, but it was clear that she wasn't. "Just a little cold." "You're burning up," Evan said. Without thinking, he pressed his hand to her forehead. The moment his skin made contact with hers, everything changed. This touch felt different, protective, gentle, and needed. Laya's skin was hot against his fingers, proving what he already feared. She had a high fever, and she was trying to hide it from him. "You need to be in bed," Evan said firmly, surprised by how strong his voice was. "But I was going to make breakfast," Laya protested softly. She swayed a little, and Evan instinctively reached out to steady her. His hands found her waist, and through the thin fabric of her pajamas, he could feel the heat coming from her body. She seemed so small, so fragile, and a strong feeling of protectiveness washed over him, unlike anything he had ever felt before. The only thing you're making is yourself worse, he said gently, guiding her to the guest bedroom where she'd been staying. Come on. Laya didn't have the strength to argue. She leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder as they walked slowly down the hall. The simple trust in her gesture made Evan's throat tight with emotion. In her bedroom, he helped her settle under the covers, moving carefully. When Laya began to shiver despite her fever, Evan pulled the blankets up to her chin, his fingers briefly brushing her neck as he tucked her in. I'll be right back, he promised. Leaving her side felt hard for the first time since she'd arrived. Evan had never cared for anyone before. His parents usually hired others when he was sick, keeping their distance even when he needed them. But now, seeing Laya so vulnerable sparked instincts he didn't know he had. He returned with a thermometer, a glass of water, and some medicine from his well-stocked cabinet. Laya's temperature was high enough to be worrisome. We should call the doctor, Evan suggested, reaching for his phone. No. Laya grabbed his wrist with unexpected strength, her fingers gripping him tightly. Please, I can't afford hospital bills, and it's just the flu. I'll be fine in a few days. The thought of money made Evan's chest ache. Here she was, ill and feverish, still worried about costs while he could easily afford the best care without a second thought. Money isn't, he started to say, but Laya's eyes were already drifting closed, the fever pulling her under. For the next few days, Evan stayed close to her. He worked from his laptop in a chair next to her bed, keeping an eye on her breathing as he worked. The irony was clear to him. He could handle a big company from a distance. But watching Laya sleep peacefully felt like the most important job he'd ever had. He made simple soups, even though his cooking skills were just about following online recipes carefully. When Laya was awake enough to eat, Evan would sit next to her on the bed and gently feed her broth. His heart felt tight every time she smiled at him. You don't have to do this, she said, after he spent a long time convincing her to eat half a bowl of soup. But I want to, Evan replied, surprised at how strong his voice sounded. I need to. The most meaningful moment happened on the second night when Laya's fever got very high and she was too weak to refuse his help. Evan prepared a lukewarm bath, nervous as he tested the water temperature repeatedly. When he returned to the bedroom, Laya was shivering, her pajamas damp with sweat. I need to cool you down, he said gently. The bath will help. Laya weakly nodded, and Evan's face felt warm as he realized what he had to do. But this was not about feelings. It was about helping the woman he cared for deeply. With great care, Evan helped Laya to the bathroom, supporting her when she wobbled. He turned away as she changed, his hands clenched at his sides, feeling that this was too personal. But when Laya made a small sound of distress, he turned back without thinking. She was in the tub, her knees pulled to her chest, tears on her cheeks. I'm sorry, she said softly. I feel so weak. I can't even take care of myself. You're not weak, Evan replied firmly, kneeling beside the tub, not caring about his clothes. You're sick. That's different. He picked up a washcloth carefully, helping to cool her heated skin. This wasn't about any deal his parents had made. It was about Laya, who had come into his life and changed everything. Each gentle touch of the cloth was something he couldn't quite say yet, a promise he was afraid to make. Thank you, Laya whispered, her eyes closed as Evan worked to ease her discomfort. Always, he said without thinking, the words slipping out like a vow. He changed the cool cloth on her forehead every hour, becoming more sure with each gentle touch. During the long nights when Laya tossed and turned due to her fever, Evan would read to her from her favorite books, his voice steady and calming despite his growing tiredness. On the second night, when her fever rose to 103, 5F, Evan was worried beyond belief. She was confused, mumbling about her mother, her classes, and things she felt she couldn't do. He sat beside her in the dark, cooling her skin with a damp cloth, whispering comforting words he hoped she could hear. I'm here, he said softly, moving the cloth across her forehead and shoulders gently. When his fingers accidentally touched her hair, damp with sweat, Laya turned her face toward him with a small sigh. Even in her delirium, she seemed to find comfort in his presence. Evan, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I'm here, he replied, putting the cloth aside to brush a curl away from her face. What do you need? Don't leave, she pleaded, her hand reaching out until it found his. Please. Evan felt a catch in his breath as Laya's fingers intertwined with his. It was the first time she had reached out, and he didn't pull away. Her hand was small and warm, her grip surprisingly strong despite her illness. I won't leave, Evan promised, getting more comfortable in his chair while still holding her hand. Laya's breathing slowed down, and her grip relaxed as she drifted into a deeper sleep. But Evan didn't let go. He stayed awake through the night, watching her face in the soft light coming through the curtains. It felt natural to hold her hand and to be there for someone who meant so much to him. By the third morning, Laya's fever had finally gone down. Evan had dozed off in the chair and woke up to find her looking at him with clear, alert eyes. You stayed, she said quietly, her voice weak but steady. I promised I would, Evan replied, realizing they were still holding hands. He thought he should pull away, create some space, but Laya kept gently stroking his hand with her thumb, and it felt soothing. Thank you for taking care of me. I know this isn't what you expected, Laya whispered. Neither is this, Evan said softly, lifting their hands to give her palm a light kiss. The moment felt special and unexpected. Laya's eyes widened in surprise, but she didn't move away. Instead, she shifted in bed, making room beside her. You must be tired. Please lie down. Evan hesitated. Sharing a bed felt like crossing a line, but the warmth in Laya's eyes was hard to resist. Holding her hand, he lay down on top of the covers next to her. They faced each other with their hands resting between them. In the morning light, Laya looked peaceful, her flushed cheeks returning to their normal color, her hair spread out like silk on the white pillow. I was scared when my fever was bad, Laya said quietly. I kept thinking about my mom and what would happen to her if I got worse. Nothing is going to happen to you, Evan said firmly, surprising even himself. I won't let that happen. Laya smiled, looking at him with curiosity. You're not what I expected, Evan Harper. What did you expect? He asked, genuinely interested. Someone cold, someone who saw this as just a deal. Laya's thumb continued to softly move across his hand. Instead, I found someone who plays beautiful music, reads poetry, and stays up all night holding my hand when I'm sick. Evan felt warmth in his cheeks. I'm not great at this, he admitted. You make me want to try, but I don't know how. You're doing well, Laya reassured him, shifting a little closer. Better than well. They talked quietly for another hour about books, music, Laya's childhood, and Evan's lonely past. The conversation felt personal and connected in a way that wasn't about attraction, but about sharing genuine thoughts. Evan found himself revealing things he had never told anyone, drawn out by Laya's warmth and the safety of their clasped hands. When Laya finally fell asleep again, Evan stayed beside her, watching her calm breathing. 3 days ago, he would have panicked at the touch of her hand. Now, he couldn't imagine letting go. Something had changed between them during her illness. The distance they had kept was fading, replaced by something deeper and more profound. Evan realized he was falling in love with Laya Bennett, and for the first time, his fears were losing to his heart. Evan sat in the warm afternoon light, imagining a future where holding Laya's hand meant so much more. It was a dream where her kindness could heal his struggles with closeness, and the woman meant to help him build a family could give him everything he had secretly longed for. Love. Chapter 5. Jealousy and Realization. Evan should have sensed trouble when Nathan Brooks knocked on his door unexpectedly one Thursday evening. His business partner rarely came to the penthouse. They always met in formal offices or through secure video calls. Nathan liked to keep things professional and simple, but there he stood in Evan's entryway, dressed sharply in a suit that likely cost a small fortune, wearing the charming smile that had helped him make major deals. Surprise visit, Nathan said confidently as he walked past Evan. I was in the area wrapping up a business deal and wanted to see how you were doing. You've been avoiding my calls for 2 weeks. He paused when Laya appeared in the kitchen doorway. Evan's heart sank as he saw Nathan's friendly expression twist into something more intense. Laya wore one of Evan's old t-shirts with leggings, her hair casually pulled back. She still looked a bit pale from her recent illness, but she was stunning, as if she belonged in his home, which made Nathan's gaze even more irritating. "Well, well," Nathan said, his voice smooth like silk. "Evan, you didn't mention you had company." "Nathan, this is Laya," Evan said, moving protectively closer to her. "Laya, my business partner, Nathan Brooks." Laya stepped forward with a kind smile, offering her hand. "Nice to meet you, Nathan. Evan has told me so much about your work together." As Nathan took her hand, Evan felt a mix of emotions rising inside him. Nathan didn't just shake Laya's hand, he held it, his thumb brushing against her knuckles in a way that made Evan feel uneasy. "The pleasure is all mine," Nathan said, looking at Laya with obvious interest. "And what brings such a lovely woman to our Evan's fortress of solitude?" Evan clenched his fists, battling the impulse to pull Nathan's hands away from Laya. He had never experienced such strong emotions before. He felt an urgent desire to claim Laya as his own, a feeling that both scared and excited him. "I'm staying here temporarily," Laya said, gently pulling her hand free. "Evan has been very kind." "I'm sure he has," Nathan replied with a knowing look that made Evan's blood boil. "Though I must say, Evan, having such lovely company is quite unexpected for you. You usually prefer solitude." The remark was meant to be light-hearted, but Evan felt the sting behind it. What could someone like Nathan possibly see in someone like him? "Would you like some coffee?" Laya offered, completely unaware of the tension in the air. "I was just making some." "I'd love some," Nathan replied smoothly. "And I would love to learn more about what you do. You seem way too interesting to be hanging out with this antisocial genius." As Laya walked toward the kitchen, Nathan followed her, his eyes focused on her movements under Evan's shirt. Evan trailed behind them, his hands trembling with anger as he watched Nathan charm her. For the next hour, Evan felt like he was stuck in a nightmare watching Nathan flirt with Laya. His business partner had everything. Evan wasn't naturally confident or charming. He couldn't make conversations flow like Nathan could. Nathan told funny stories about their work, praised Laya's intelligence, and pulled her into lively talks about books and art. Worse than that, Laya was clearly enjoying herself. She laughed at Nathan's jokes, answered his questions about her studies, and seemed completely at ease with his attention. Evan sat still, like a statue, watching the woman he liked be entertained by someone who could give her everything he couldn't offer: confidence, and a normal relationship without the issues they had. As the evening came to a close, Nathan suggested, "We should all have dinner sometime. I know a great restaurant in Soho. Very romantic." The way he looked at Laya when he said romantic made Evan feel furious. "That sounds nice," Laya started to say, but Evan cut her off. "Actually, we're quite busy," Evan said, his tone colder than he meant. "Laya has her studies and I have several projects to finish." Nathan raised an eyebrow at Evan's tone, but he smiled as he replied, "Of course, but surely even workaholics need to eat. Laya, maybe you would like to see some of the city while you're here. I'd be glad to show you around." The invitation was clearly meant for Laya only. The anger building in Evan finally burst. "She doesn't need a tour guide," Evan snapped, standing up quickly. "And I'm sure you have better things to do than play tourist with my guest." The silence that followed was heavy. Nathan appeared genuinely surprised by Evan's outburst, while Laya looked at him, clearly shocked by his jealousy. "Right," Nathan said slowly, his mind already working through what Evan's anger meant. "Well, it's getting late anyway, Laya. It was really nice to meet you. Evan, we'll talk soon." After Nathan left, the room felt full of unspoken tension. Laya stood in the kitchen, arms crossed, looking at Evan with an unreadable expression. "That was rude," she finally said. "He was flirting with you," Evan replied, his voice rough with emotions he couldn't contain. "Was he?" Laya raised an eyebrow, challenging him. "He was just being friendly. There's a difference." "There's no difference with Nathan," Evan said bitterly. "He collects beautiful women like some people collect art. You'd just be another Mark." "And what would I be to you, Evan?" Laya asked softly, her question cutting through everything they had been avoiding. Evan stared at her, unable to speak. What was she to him? More than just a guest. More than he had ever thought he could want. But how could he explain that when he could barely understand it himself? I don't know, he whispered finally, the truth pouring out like a confession. Laya's expression softened. Then maybe you should figure it out. She turned to go, but Evan called her name, desperation making him brave. Don't go out with him, Evan said, his voice trembling. Please. Laya paused in the doorway. Why not? Because... Evan struggled to find the words to express the turmoil in his heart. Because I can't bear the idea of him being close to you. Watching him look at you made me feel things I never thought I could. The thought of you laughing with him, being sweet to him, really hurts me. The words hung between them, open and honest and scary. Laya turned to him slowly, her eyes wide with something like wonder. Evan, she said softly, and the sound of his name felt special. I know I shouldn't ask this, Evan continued, his voice growing stronger. I know our agreement doesn't give me a right to you, but I'm asking because the idea of losing you to someone like Nathan is hard for me. Laya quickly crossed the room, raising her hands to frame his face. Evan felt his heart race as he felt her warmth. You're not losing me to anyone, she whispered, and you have more right to ask than you think. Laya, Evan said softly, covering her hands with his. I wanted to make you a bit envious, she admitted, her cheeks turning red. When Nathan was flirting, I hoped it would make you finally speak up about your feelings. How I feel, Evan repeated, feeling butterflies in his chest. Like maybe this has grown beyond a simple agreement, Laya said, standing on her tiptoes until their faces were very close. Like maybe we both care for something real. Evan suddenly felt everything he had been holding back break free. All the fear, all the space he had kept between them, all the walls around his heart fell away with Laya's sincere words. Without thinking, he gently held her face and kissed her. The kiss was all he had dreamt of and yet so surprising. Laya's lips felt soft and warm, and as she relaxed against him, he felt as if he was soaring and falling at the same time. Months of wanting flowed into that kiss, the dreams he'd had, and every gentle touch had led them to this moment. Evan's hands found their way into Laya's hair, and she moved closer, wrapping her arms around him as if she wanted to stay there forever. When they finally broke apart, both of them breathing fast, Evan put his forehead against hers. I think I'm falling in love with you, he whispered, the words slipping out. I think I've been falling since the first moment we met. Laya's smile lit up the room. Good, she replied, pulling him down for another kiss. Because I'm already there. The next morning, after their first kiss, Evan woke up feeling excited and full of hope. For the first time, he had told someone he loved her, and she had said it back. The memory of Laya's sweet kiss, the way she melted into his arms, and their shared moments played over and over in his mind like his favorite song. But with the morning came questions. What do people do after they confess their love? How should he act around Laya now that everything felt so different? Evan found the answer when he walked into the kitchen and saw Laya making coffee in one of his shirts, her legs bare beneath it. She looked up when he came in, and her bright smile chased away all his worries. Good morning, she said softly, stepping closer without the distance they'd kept before. Did you sleep well? Instead of replying with words, Evan held her face gently and kissed her good morning soft and sweet. When they pulled apart, Laya's eyes sparkled with joy. Much better now, Evan whispered, smiling at how natural everything felt. This feels right. I have an idea, Laya said, wrapping her arms around him. What if we went on a real date, something that normal couples do? The word couples made Evan's heart race. What do you have in mind? There's an art show opening at the Met today, she replied, her excitement contagious. It's contemporary artists reimagining classic themes. It sounds perfect for someone who likes both new ideas and tradition. Evan hesitated. The Metropolitan Museum meant crowds and strangers, which usually made him anxious, but the hope in Laya's eyes inspired him to be brave. I'd like that, he said, surprised by his own confidence. But first, let me make this official. That afternoon, Evan did something he had never done as an adult. He called a car service instead of hiding behind his computer. As they drove through Manhattan, Laya's hand was warm in his. Evan noticed how different the city felt when he wasn't afraid. The museum was as busy as he had feared, but something wonderful happened as they explored the galleries together. With Laya beside him, her arm linked through his, the noise faded into the background. Her excitement was so engaging as she moved him from painting to painting, sharing insights with the passion of someone who loved art. "Look at this one," she said, stopping in front of a large canvas that reimagined a classic piece featuring a modern woman rising from city waters. "The way she merges classic beauty with current ideas is brilliant," she added. Evan found himself studying the painting, not just for its beauty, but for the way Laya's eyes sparkled as she explained it. When she pointed out details in the brushwork, he leaned in closer, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Do you see that gold thread in her hair?" Laya asked, leaning back against him. Evan nodded but was more captivated by her floral scent that felt warm and inviting. When his breath brushed against her ear, she shuddered slightly. "Evan," she said softly, a nice warning. "Sorry," he responded, but he didn't step back. Instead, he gently held her waist as they moved through the gallery like they were dancing. By the time they finished the exhibition, Evan was feeling joyful from Laya's closeness. The way she leaned into him when she got excited and how her hand would unintentionally rest on his chest made every moment special, creating a tension that was filled with warmth. "That was amazing," Laya said when they stepped outside into the soft afternoon light. "Thank you for coming with me." "Thank you for showing me," Evan replied. "I've been to museums before, but I've never experienced them through your eyes." They decided to stroll back to his building, enjoying Central Park as the sun dipped behind the trees. Other couples walked by, and for the first time, Evan felt like he belonged among them. "Tell me something," Laya said as they found a bench by the lake. "What do you enjoy most about building software?" Evan thought about her question, surprised by its personal touch. "It's the moment when everything finally works together, when you've been stuck on a problem for days, and then the answer suddenly comes to you. I'm amazed at how elegant this all is, almost like magic," Laya said. "It's like we understand each other right away." "Exactly," Evan replied. "What about you? What do you love most about literature?" "The way it can make you feel less alone," Laya answered without thinking. "When you come across something that describes your own feelings so perfectly, and you see someone else has felt that way too." Evan looked at her, taking in her profile in the dim light. "Is that why you want to teach?" "Partly," Laya nodded. "I want to help students find that same connection, that feeling of being noticed." "You make me feel noticed," Evan said quietly, surprised by his own words. Laya turned to him, her eyes showing warmth. "You make me feel brave," she said. "Like I can just be myself." The sincerity in the moment was delicate and beautiful. Evan reached out to gently touch her cheek, his thumb gliding over her smile. "I'd like to take you somewhere special," he said suddenly. "Where?" Evan stood up, offering his hand. "Trust me." 20 minutes later, they were on the rooftop of his building, overlooking the city like a sea of stars. Evan had prepared a lovely dinner with candles, flowers, and her favorite drink, all set up thoughtfully. "This is beautiful," Laya exclaimed, her eyes sparkling with delight. "Not as beautiful as you," Evan responded, and the words felt easy and sincere. They shared dinner while stars began to shine, talking about anything and everything, their conversation flowing effortlessly. When a soft song floated up from a wedding next door, Evan stood and held out his hand. "Shall we dance?" he asked. "Here?" Laya inquired, yet she was already getting up to join him. "Yes," Evan confirmed, drawing her close. They swayed in the candlelight, Laya's head resting on his shoulder, their bodies fitting together perfectly. Evan had never danced with anyone before, but with Laya, it felt right. "This is perfect," Laya whispered gently against him. Evan spun her around, laughing at his own awkwardness, and then pulled her back to him. When the song ended, they stayed in each other's arms, not wanting to let go. "Laya," Evan said softly, his hands framing her face in the soft light of the stars. "I'm going to kiss you now," he said quietly, "and I'm going to do it without being afraid." "Good," Laya said, rising slightly to meet him. This time the kiss was different. It was deeper and more confident. Evan poured his heart into it, showing Laya just how much she meant to him. When she sighed, he felt invincible. "I love you," Evan whispered. "I love you too," Laya replied, making his heart soar. Under the stars, Evan realized he wasn't scared of tomorrow anymore. With Laya by his side, the future seemed filled with bright possibilities he had never imagined. He was learning what it meant to love, and it was the most beautiful experience of his life. Evan spent all day planning for a special evening, but by night his hands shook as he tried to light the candles. It had been 3 weeks since their first kiss, 3 weeks of growing closer in every way, except for the one that made him the most nervous. They had shared many tender moments and whispers in the dark, but they hadn't crossed the last line, the one that would make their bond complete. Tonight felt different. Evan wanted to show Laya how much he loved her, even if he felt unsure because he was new to all of this. The terrace of the penthouse had been changed into something magical. Hundreds of white candles flickered in glass holders, making pools of warm light against the New York City skyline. Rose petals scattered across the dining table seemed to capture the light, and soft music from a string quartet floated up from the courtyard below. Evan checked his watch for the 10th time in 5 minutes. Laya was getting ready in her room, allowing him time to set up their dinner. Though set up was a kind term for simply arranging takeout from the city's fancy restaurant on nice plates. "Laya," he heard her voice softly call from behind him. He turned around and his breath caught. Laya stood in the doorway wearing a beautiful deep blue dress that seemed to catch the light perfectly. The fabric hugged her shape before flowing gracefully to her ankles, and her hair was styled up, showing her neck. But it was her eyes filled with love, trust, and the same nervous excitement he felt that made his heart skip a beat. "You look beautiful," Evan whispered, the words simple yet sincere. "So do you," Laya replied, her gaze taking in the candlelit terrace, the rose petals, and the clear care he had put into every detail. "Evan, this is amazing." She walked toward him as if she were part of a dream. When she reached him, Evan took her hands in his, astonished by how natural it felt. "I wanted tonight to be special," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I wanted you to know how much you matter to me." "I already know," Laya assured him, standing on her tiptoes to place a gentle kiss on his lips. "But show me anyway." Dinner became a blur of soft talks and meaningful glances. Evan found it hard to focus on the wonderful food because he was captivated by how the candlelight danced on Laya's skin and the way her lips curled when she smiled. She seemed to hold secrets in her eyes that set his heart racing. "You're staring," Laya said softly once they finished eating. "I can't help it," Evan admitted. "I keep thinking I'm dreaming. At any moment I'll wake up and you'll be gone." Laya stood and walked around the table to him, placing her hands on his shoulders. "I'm not going anywhere," she said softly but firmly. "I'm right where I want to be." Evan stood up, wrapping his arms around her waist, wishing he could keep her close with just a touch. When he kissed her, it was filled with all the emotions he had held back, all the love he had been afraid to show. Laya melted into him, her soft laugh making him feel lightheaded. "Laya," he whispered, his hands softly resting in her hair. "I know," she replied, understanding his unspoken needs. "I want this too. I want you." In that moment, Evan felt his control slip. He swept Laya into his arms, carrying her inside as she laughed gently against him. He had imagined this moment many times, but nothing had prepared him for how real it felt to have her in his arms, wanting to be close to him. Once in his bedroom, Evan gently set Laya down beside the bed, his hands trembling as they framed her face. "I've never," he began, but then stopped, feeling shy. "I know," Laya said softly, placing her hands over his. "We can take our time. We'll figure it out together." The kindness in her voice touched him deeply. Evan kissed her with deep gratitude, pouring all his love and fear into the moment. When Laya's hands moved to the buttons of his shirt, he held his breath, letting her touch him with gentle care. "You're beautiful," Laya whispered, her hands gently exploring his chest and arms. Evan had always seen his body as just useful, but under Laya's admiring gaze, he felt different. When it was his turn to help Laya, Evan's hands shook as he slowly unzipped her dress. The fabric fell softly to the floor, revealing her glowing skin in the candlelight. Laya was a perfect mix of softness and strength that left Evan breathless. "Touch me," she said softly, guiding his hands to her waist and shoulders, showing him how to appreciate her with gentle movements. Evan learned quickly, feeling more confident as Laya's soft reactions let him know what she enjoyed. When he kissed her neck, she leaned closer to him. When his hands moved along her back, she shivered. When he whispered her name, she pulled him even closer. They moved to the bed, side by side, their hearts beating together. Evan had read about intimacy and seen it in films, but nothing prepared him for the reality of being with Laya so closely. "Are you okay?" Laya asked when Evan paused, his body trembling. "More than okay," he replied, his voice full of emotion. "I love you so much, it scares me." "Don't be scared," Laya said, her hands gently touching his face and shoulders, grounding him. "This is beautiful. We are beautiful." When they finally came together, Evan felt overwhelmed by the intensity. Laya was warm and accepting, and each movement brought tears to his eyes. They took their time at first, discovering each other's rhythms and what made the other react with joy. "Like this?" Evan asked, his voice strained as he tried to be what she needed. "Perfect," Laya breathed, wrapping her legs around him. Evan found joy in her words. He buried his face in her neck, breathing in her scent as they moved together. Every touch and soft word was a new discovery. This was what he had been missing, the fear he had about love and connection. Laya's breathing grew uneven, her fingers clutching his shoulders as she called his name softly, breaking his control. Together they climbed toward something beautiful and overwhelming, their hearts and bodies in sync. "Evan," Laya gasped, caught up in the moment. "I love you." "I love you," he replied, lost in feelings as they shared a deep connection. Afterward, they lay together in the candlelight, their breathing slowly calming. Evan held Laya close, still surprised that this wonderful woman had chosen him. "That was," Evan started, then paused, feeling how hard it was to find the right words. "Perfect," Laya finished, lifting her head to smile at him. "You are perfect." "I was scared," Evan said honestly, making Laya look at him softly. "I know," she said, giving him a gentle kiss on his chest. "But you were brave. You trusted me and let me love you," Evan said while pulling her close. "How could I not? You make me brave. You make me believe I can be more than I thought." They spoke in soft tones as the candles burned low. The distant city hummed like a quiet song. Evan held Laya's hand and felt peace spread through him, surprised at how natural it felt to care for her and be cared for. "What are you thinking?" Laya asked when she noticed his still eyes. "I spent 28 years believing I was broken," Evan answered. "I thought moments like this were not for me. Then you showed me that love is not about being perfect. It is about being real." "You were never broken," Laya replied, her palms gently framing his face. "You just needed someone to remind you of your worth." Evan kissed her, soft and sure, full of hope. Later they rested wrapped together, safe in the fading candlelight. For the first time, he did not fear tomorrow. With Laya near, the future looked bright. Love had found him and turned his world into light. Chapter 8. Complications. Morning came. Evan woke to gentle kisses that made him smile. 3 days had passed since they first shared true closeness, and each dawn felt new. Every laugh, every quiet touch, every gentle sigh drew them nearer. "Good morning," Laya whispered, her voice rough with sleep. "A very good morning," Evan replied, tucking a curl behind her ear. They had hardly left the suite, living on trays of food brought to the door and the joy of learning each other. "I was thinking," Laya began, pressing a quick kiss to his palm, that we should step outside, feel the sun, and remember the world beyond this room. Why would we do that? Evan asked with a playful grin, pulling her across his chest. I like our small world just as it is. Laya laughed, the sound making his heart lift. Because I need a shower that does not turn into a long distraction, she teased. I do not distract you, Evan said while tracing gentle circles on her waist. I improved the experience. She raised an eyebrow, but her words faded when he kissed her neck. The room fell quiet again, filled only with soft smiles. We cannot stay in bed forever, she murmured. Watch me, Evan said, half serious. I have years of lost time to make up for. Their morning closeness was slow and tender, a quiet sharing of hearts. Evan treasured every moment, treating each breath as a gift. Together they learned that real love was gentle yet strong, and even one small room could hold an entire world. When they finally got to the shower an hour later, Evan kept his promise to make it special. His hands were soapy as he explored Laya, making her gasp his name against the wall. Suddenly, they were interrupted by the sound of the private elevator chiming, breaking their moment. Both froze, eyes wide with shock. Are you expecting someone? Laya whispered, wrapping a towel around herself. Evan shook his head, his heart racing. No one had access to his penthouse except his parents, and they weren't due back from Europe for another 3 months. Then he heard his mother's voice echoing through the penthouse, followed by the sound of her heels clicking on the marble. We're home early! Where are you, darling? Panic rushed through Evan. His parents could not find Laya in such a situation. Get dressed, he whispered urgently to Laya, who was already reaching for her clothes. I'll go distract them. He quickly put on jeans and a t-shirt, trying to look casual. Stepping into the hallway, he saw his parents coming around the corner. Their faces shifted from surprise to careful scrutiny. Eleanor Harper looked like the perfect, wealthy matriarch with her shiny silver hair and designer clothes. Beside her stood Charles, his father, in a sharp suit, his keen eyes taking in every detail. Mother, father, Evan said, trying to sound calm. You're back early. The Brussels conference ended sooner than expected, Charles replied, his gaze fixed sharply on Evan. We weren't meant to come back for another 3 months, but we heard some interesting news about you. Evan's heart raced. Had they been keeping tabs on him? Of course they had. I've been working on a new project, Evan said, which wasn't exactly a lie. Learning to love Laya felt like a project, just not one his parents would understand. How wonderful, Eleanor smiled, but there was something assessing about her gaze. And how is our arrangement going? I trust Miss Bennet is doing well. Evan felt uneasy at the way she spoke about Laya. She's fine. Everything is fine, he said. Excellent, Charles said, clapping Evan on the shoulder with forced friendliness. We were hoping to meet with her this morning to discuss the contract. It's important to clarify everyone's expectations. Evan felt a chill. That's not necessary. We're managing everything ourselves. Nonsense, Eleanor said dismissively. This is too important to leave to chance. Where is she? Before Evan could say anything, Laya appeared in the hallway. She was fully dressed, though her hair was a bit messy. She moved toward them with her usual grace, but Evan noticed the tension in her shoulders. Mr. and Mrs. Harper, Laya said politely, extending her hand. I'm Laya Bennet. It's a pleasure to meet you. Eleanor's smile was cold as she shook Laya's hand. Indeed. How has your stay been, my dear? Wonderful, Laya replied, her voice steady despite the awkwardness. Evan has been very kind. I'm sure he has, Charles said, his tone suggesting something more that made Evan want to stand protectively in front of Laya. Maybe we should sit down and talk about the situation, Eleanor suggested firmly. Her words cut through the conversation. This is a business matter, and it's essential to keep things professional. Evan felt a wave of confusion. Business matter? Professional? It was as if the love he had with Laya was just a contract to handle. The original terms were clear, Charles added, taking out a leather folder. 6 months with specific expectations about emotions. We worry that those lines may have blurred. I think we're managing just fine without outside help, Evan replied, more sharply than he meant to. Outside help? Charles raised an eyebrow. We are trying to look out for you. Women like Miss Bennett can make men believe in things that aren't real. What do you mean by that? Evan asked, clenching his hands into fists. It means, Eleanor spoke with a cold calmness, that some people are skilled at confusing gratitude with love and physical closeness with true emotional connection. You are giving Miss Bennett a lot of money. It would be naive to think her feelings are completely genuine. Laya remained quiet beside him, her face blank but filled with hidden hurt. He noticed her hands shaking and how she seemed to shrink back with each sharp comment. Charles continued, "We've talked to several experts who say that men with your background are often vulnerable to experienced women." Experienced? Evan's voice grew tense. What are you saying about Laya? We're not saying anything negative, Eleanor replied smoothly. We are just stating facts. Miss Bennett answered a specific ad for help. She needed money, and now she lives with you while getting close to someone who hasn't had a romantic connection before. It all seems very calculated. Evan felt as if he had been hit by each word. He turned to Laya, who had gone even paler, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. For a moment, he viewed her through his parents' eyes, a woman needing money, pressing against him affectionately to secure her place. That's not true, Evan said, but his voice trembled. He hated that doubt was beginning to creep into his mind. Isn't it? Eleanor asked gently, as if speaking to a child. You've always been alone, dear. You have no experience with women or knowing if someone's feelings are true. Stop, Laya said quietly, her voice steady, though her hands shook. Please don't do this. We're just looking out for our son, Charles said. This was supposed to be straightforward, just a simple agreement. Just a simple agreement, Evan repeated, feeling the weight of those words heavy in his mind. He glanced at Laya, seeing her through his parents' perspective, a woman needing money, aiming to win his affection so she could secure her future. Evan, Laya said softly, reaching for his hand. He pulled back before she could grasp it. The hurt on her face struck him deeply, and he immediately wished he'd not done it, but the damage was done. His parents had planted seeds of doubt in his mind, and now they were growing like unwelcome weeds in his heart. Maybe Miss Bennett needs some time to think about the original plan, Eleanor suggested sweetly, or if she wanted to explore other options. Laya stood up suddenly, keeping her dignity even as everything around her fell apart. I should go, she said softly. This was a mistake. Lila, wait, Evan called as she began to walk away. But she was already moving on, her back straight and head held high. Evan started to follow her, but his father held him back. Let her go, son, Charles said kindly. If she truly cared, she would have stayed to fight for you. Her leaving shows our point. For the next hour, Evan paced in his penthouse like a restless animal, while his parents slowly broke down everything he believed about his relationship with Laya. They showed him financial records about her family's struggles, studies explaining how being alone made him easy to manipulate, and stories from others who had been misled by women in tough situations. But as Evan listened to their analysis of his feelings, he realized they were mistaken about something important. Laya wasn't leaving because she didn't care. She was leaving because she did care. The idea of staying to defend a love that had just been questioned was too painful to face. By the time Evan understood this and pushed past his parents to find Laya, she was already gone. Her clothes, her books, every trace of her had disappeared as though she had never been there, except for the faint scent of her perfume and the deep ache in Evan's heart. He had found love, and in less than an hour he had lost it, not due to fate, but because of the doubt his parents had filled him with. Standing in the empty space that had been Laya's refuge, Evan realized he had made a terrible mistake, and he had no idea how to make it right. The woman he loved was gone, and it was all his fault. For 3 weeks, Evan lived in turmoil. He buried himself in work, coding for 18 hours a day until his eyes hurt and his hands were sore. He met with investors, launched new projects, and earned millions, but none of it mattered without Laya to celebrate with him. His penthouse felt like a gloomy place, every corner filled with memories of her laughter and warmth that had once brought life to his dull world. His parents were happy with his renewed focus, praising his hard work while avoiding any mention of Laya. But Evan could see through their smiles. They thought they had succeeded in pulling him away from what they saw as a harmful distraction. They didn't know that every moment without Laya was slowly breaking his heart. Evan searched for her, hiring the best private investigators he could afford. But Laya had completely disappeared. She had closed her bank accounts, left her apartment, and withdrawn from university. She was living off cash, staying in places that didn't need background checks. She didn't want to be found, and Evan couldn't blame her. He had let his parents' doubts ruin the best thing in his life. But 3 weeks of heartache brought one clear truth to light. He cared for Laya Bennett more than he feared what his parents would think. He valued her more than their money and approval, and even more than his own comfort and safety. He was determined to find her and spend his life making up for the time he doubted her love. "We need to talk," Evan said as he entered his father's study, where both his parents were looking over reports at breakfast. Charles Harper looked up, surprised. "Of course, son. What's on your mind?" "I'm ending the arrangement," Evan said directly. "All of it, the contract, the expectations, everything." Eleanor's coffee cup shook on its saucer. "Evan, what are you talking about?" "I'm talking about choosing love instead of duty," Evan replied confidently. "I'm in love with Laya Bennett, and I'm going to marry her, not because of some contract you made, but because she is the best thing that has ever happened to me." The silence that followed was heavy. Evan's parents exchanged looks of shock, disappointment, and calculation. "Son," Charles said carefully, "you're being emotional. Miss Bennett handled herself well, but she didn't manipulate things. She loved me, and I was too afraid to stand up for that love when you criticized it." "This is exactly what we worried about," Eleanor said as she stood up, visibly upset. "You've mixed up a business deal with a love story." "No, you've mixed up control with care," Evan said firmly. "You've tried to control my life for too long, and I'm done." Evan went to his father's safe and entered the combination he knew from a rebellious moment years before. Inside, under papers and jewelry, lay the original contract. "This is how I feel about your arrangement," Evan said as he tore it into pieces that fell like confetti on the rug. "You can't be serious," Charles said, his calm demeanor breaking. "You're worth a lot of money. You could have anyone." "Why throw that away for someone who," Evan interrupted, "for someone who made me laugh for the first time in years, someone who showed me that being open is a strength, not a weakness, someone who looked past my worries and saw the real me." Eleanor pointed out the negatives, and her words shook Evan's confidence for a moment, but he pushed the doubt away. "She left because I made her feel unwanted. That's my fault." As Evan moved towards the door, his father's voice stopped him. "There's something you should know," Charles said quietly, "about the contract and why we brought Miss Bennett here." Evan turned slowly, feeling dread. "The arrangement was never meant to last," Charles continued. "We've been working with our lawyers to make sure we could end it cleanly if needed." "What does that mean?" Evan asked, unsure if he really wanted the answer. Eleanor pulled a folder from her briefcase, keeping her face neutral. "It means we have already filed to have the contract recognized as invalid. We can argue that your feelings for Miss Bennett were influenced by your struggles with social situations." "Influenced?" Evan's voice was quiet and tense. "Your social anxiety, your isolation, your lack of experience with women," Charles explained calmly, "all documented in your therapy records. Any good lawyer could say you were taken advantage of by someone who knew how to use your weaknesses." The betrayal hit Evan hard. "You're trying to hurt her." "We want to help you," Eleanor insisted, "and our family's reputation. Do you know what the media would do with this story? The headlines alone?" "I don't care about headlines," Evan said, shaking with anger. "I won't let you harm the woman I love just to protect your image." "It's too late," Charles replied coldly. "The papers are already filed. Miss Bennett has been informed that any claims against our family or attempts to contact you will lead to legal steps." Evan felt dizzy. "You had her served. You've removed her as a threat," Eleanor said plainly. "She can't come after you for anything. She can't share her story or embarrass our family. She's been made aware that any future contact will have serious results." "You monsters!" Evan gasped, stepping back toward the door. "You complete monsters!" He ran from the room, from the house, from the heavy pressure of his family's expectations. In his car, he sped through Manhattan traffic without a clear direction. Evan's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "She's in Millbrook at Miller's Diner on Route 44. She's been working there since she left. She's been asking for you, a friend." Evan's hands trembled as he read the message. Someone, possibly one of the investigators he had hired, had found her. Laya was less than 2 hours away, and if his parents were correct about the legal papers, she probably thought he was behind it all. By the time he reached the small town of Millbrook, evening shadows were spreading across the landscape. Miller's Diner was just as he had imagined it, a classic small-town place with checkered floors and neon signs for pie. Through the window, he could see her. Laya wore a simple uniform, her hair tied back, moving through the tables with the same grace that had first attracted him. But even from a distance, Evan noticed the changes. She looked thinner, tired, and she kept a careful distance from customers, as if protecting herself from more hurt. When the diner's bell chimed as he entered, conversations paused. Small towns noticed newcomers, especially those arriving in fancy cars dressed in designer clothes, but Evan only had eyes for Laya, who stood frozen by a booth, her face showing shock, joy, and fear all at once. "Laya," he called, her name like a prayer. She set down the coffee pot she held with shaky hands. "You shouldn't be here." "I know about the legal papers," Evan said, moving toward her despite the curious glances from other diners. "I know what my parents did. I had nothing to do with it." "Evan, please." Laya's voice was barely audible. "I can't. This is exactly what they warned would happen if I tried to reach you." "I don't care what they said," Evan replied, close enough to see the tears in her eyes. "I'm here because I love you. I've spent 3 weeks regretting that choosing my parents over you was the biggest mistake of my life." Laya glanced around the diner, realizing they had an audience. "Not here, please." Evan followed her outside into the parking lot, where the autumn air carried the aroma of burning leaves and the chill of winter. Under the soft light of a street lamp, Laya looked fragile and beautiful, deeply sad. "I tried to call you," she said quietly. "After I left, I wanted to explain and fight for us. Your parents' lawyers warned that any contact would bring legal trouble for me and for my mother." "My mother," Evan said at once, feeling a sudden stab of worry. "How is she? How are the treatments?" "She is all right," Laya replied. "The hospital helped with most of the cost. She does not need your money." Her tone made the words "your money" sound heavy and cold. Evan felt his chest tighten. "Laya, I never cared about an inheritance," he said. "I cared because you make me feel alive." "I know," she whispered. "But wanting me is not enough, is it? Your parents will never welcome me. To them, I am only the woman who answered their notice." "Then let us build a life without them," Evan begged. "We can go where they have no power." Laya's sad smile hurt more than harsh words. "Evan, there is something you must hear, and it changes everything." She placed both hands on her stomach. Evan stopped breathing. "I am pregnant." The words floated in the cold night like a strange mix of hope and fear. "Pregnant?" he echoed. 8 weeks, Laya said, tears running down her face. "I learned 2 days ago. I did not know how to tell you." Evan reached out, but she stepped back. "Your parents were right about one thing," she said. "This is complicated. You have your whole future ahead, and I will not trap you with a child you did not expect." "Trap me?" Evan's voice shook. "You carry our child. That is a gift. It makes every harsh word from your parents feel true," Laya answered. "They called me a seeker of wealth who would cling to a rich man. Now it looks as if they were right." "That is not our story, and you know it." "Do I?" she asked. "I cannot see the line between real love and duty, between the feelings we shared and the promise we both tried to keep." She turned away. "Do not run again," he cried. "We can face this together." "I need time," she said without turning. "Time to think about the baby, about us, about what is best." "How long?" Evan asked. "I do not know." Then she walked into the diner, leaving him alone in the parking lot, his heart in pieces. Driving back to Manhattan, Evan knew that finding Laya had been the easy part. Winning back her trust while his parents meddled would be the hardest work of his life. Yet he felt ready. The woman he loved carried his child, and he would not let fear, doubt, or family pressure steal their chance at joy. He would not let her run again. He would prove that their love was worth every struggle. Chapter 10. Life and Love. 3 months passed. 91 long days filled with private investigators, false trails, and sleepless nights that dragged into pale dawn. Evan searched every hospital, every clinic, every shelter within 500 meters of Millbrook. Laya had vanished, and with her went their unborn child. The empty space in his heart grew each day. He lost 40 pounds in weight and much more in money as his business bled cash. His parents finally ended their court threats, partly because Evan moved his assets into a protected trust, and partly because even they feared the depth of their son's resolve. "She doesn't want to be found," his mother had said during their last talk. Maybe it was time to accept that and move on. But Evan couldn't let go. Not when Laya was having his child. Not when she was alone and likely having money troubles. Not when every day brought her closer to her due date, a date he had counted down to many times, letting it fill his thoughts. Then something surprising happened. Detective Sarah Chen, the private investigator Evan had been working with, called him at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in December, her voice buzzing with excitement. "I found her," she said right away, "in a small town called Pine Valley in upstate New York. She's working at a diner named Maggie's Place, paying cash for a room above it." Evan was already reaching for his keys. "Send me the address." "Mr. Harper, wait," Detective Chen said, her voice urgent. "There's something else. I spoke to the diner owner quietly, and she told me your girlfriend has been having a tough pregnancy, high blood pressure and early contractions. She's been working extra shifts to save money for bills." Fear gripped Evan's heart. "Is she okay?" "As of yesterday, yes, but Mr. Harper, she's due any day now. If you're going to do this, you need to hurry." Evan was in his car before the call was over, GPS set to Pine Valley, his heart racing with a mix of hope and worry. The drive through the dark early morning felt endless, with him checking his phone for updates from Detective Chen. Pine Valley looked like a picture-perfect town with tree-lined streets and old houses with big porches, a place where everyone knew each other and newcomers stood out. Maggie's Place was on Main Street, nestled between a used bookstore and a vintage shop, its warm lights shining through the cold December air. Evan parked across the street and took a moment to gather his courage. Inside the diner, he noticed farmers and shop owners starting their day, sipping coffee and chatting, but he couldn't see Laya. The bell above the door jingled when he walked in, and conversation paused as everyone turned to look at the stranger in the expensive coat. The woman behind the counter, maybe in her 60s with gray hair and friendly eyes, approached him, her presence protective. "Can I help you, dear?" she asked. "I'm looking for Laya Bennett," Evan replied, his voice rough from the long drive. "I'm the father of her baby." The woman's face changed from tiredness to something softer. "You're him," she said, "the one she's been upset about." Evan felt a tightness in his chest. "Is she here? Is she okay?" "She's upstairs," the woman Maggie said quietly. "But dear, she's had a hard time these past few months. Be kind to her." "I made mistakes," Evan said simply. "I let fear come between us, and I'm here to fix it." Maggie studied him for a moment before pointing to a door marked private. "Apartment 2B. But if you hurt her again, you'll have to answer to me." Evan climbed the narrow stairs, his heart pounding. Each step brought him closer to seeing the woman he had missed for 3 months. The hallway was dim and smelled of coffee and breakfast from downstairs. Apartment 2B had a plain wooden door, showing no signs of the lively woman who lived inside. Evan raised his hand to knock, but stopped when he heard sounds from inside, a soft, painful moan followed by quick breaths. Panic hit him as he realized what was happening. Laya was in labor. He banged on the door. "It's me. It's Evan." "Go away," Laya replied, her voice shaky and filled with fear. "I'm not leaving," he said firmly, trying the door handle. "Laya, you need help." "I'm fine," she gasped, but another wave of pain made her cry out. Without thinking, Evan stepped back and slammed his shoulder against the door, using all his strength to break it open. The door flew open, and Evan hurried into a tiny apartment that looked bare and sad. In the middle of the room was Laya, his strong and beautiful Laya, hunched over on the floor, clearly suffering. She was very pregnant, her face pale and wet with tears, her hands pressed against her round belly. "Laya," Evan said softly, kneeling beside her. "How long have you been like this?" "Since midnight," she whispered. Then, grasping his hand, she cried out as another contraction hit. "Evan, I'm scared." Looking down, Evan saw blood on the towel beneath her, far more than seemed safe. Laya's skin had turned a worrying gray. "We need to get you to a hospital," he said, reaching for his phone. "No hospital," Laya said urgently. "I can't afford it." "I don't care about money," Evan interrupted as he dialed. "You're bleeding too much." "Our baby," he managed to say, his voice breaking. "Our baby needs help." The 911 operator was calm, but her questions made Evan more anxious. How much blood? Was the baby moving? "There was a snowstorm," she said. "An ambulance would take 20 minutes. Evan looked at Laya, who was looking paler, and knew they might not have that long. "I have to help deliver the baby myself," he told the operator, his voice somehow steady despite feeling panic inside. "Are you trained?" she asked. "No, but I won't let my family suffer while we wait for help." For the next half hour, Evan faced a nightmare. Following the operator's instructions, he helped Laya through each wave of pain, trying to provide comfort and prepare towels and water. Laya held onto his fingers tightly, leaving marks on his skin that he would remember with pride. "I'm sorry," she panted between contractions. "I'm sorry I didn't believe in us." "Don't apologize," Evan replied fiercely, brushing her hair from her face. "You have nothing to be sorry for. I should have trusted us." "I love you," Laya whispered through her tears and pain. "I never stopped loving you." "I love you too," Evan said, tears streaming down his face. "We're going to love our baby. We'll be a family, Laya." Just then, the paramedics rushed through the broken door, ready to help. As Laya's labor intensified, they quickly took over, bringing their skills to the situation. "Contractions are coming fast," the lead paramedic announced as they got ready to assist. "We're going to help deliver this baby right here." Evan held Laya's hand the entire time, whispering words of love and encouragement as their son entered the world. When Benjamin Harper Bennett took his first breath and let out a strong cry, Evan felt a wave of relief and pure happiness. "He's perfect," Laya whispered, tired but glowing as the paramedics placed their son on her chest. "Just like his mother," Evan said gently, leaning down to kiss her forehead while their baby boy held tightly onto his finger with little hands. The trip to the hospital was a quick blur of sirens and beeping machines, with Evan holding Laya's hand tightly as she drifted in and out of sleep. Their son, Benjamin Evan, was resting peacefully in a special carrier, his tiny chest rising and falling steadily. He was in the hospital after surgery to fix some serious problems that nearly hurt Laya. After hours of tests confirmed that Benjamin was completely healthy despite the stressful situation, Evan finally felt able to relax. He sat beside Laya in the recovery room, Benjamin sleeping in his arms, and marveled at how happy he felt. His son had 10 little fingers, 10 tiny toes, and lungs that worked perfectly. Laya was alive and recovering well, her color returning to normal. "We did it," Laya whispered, her voice soft, but her eyes bright as she watched Evan hold their son. "We're actually a family." "We are," Evan replied, leaning down to kiss her forehead. "And I'm never letting either of you go again. Nothing else matters now. All that matters is us." He gestured to include the three of them in a perfect circle of love they had created against all challenges. "I want to marry you," Evan said suddenly. Not because of any agreement, but because he couldn't imagine spending another day without her as his wife. "Will you marry me, Laya Bennett?" Laya's smile was bright even through her tiredness. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes to everything. Yes to being your wife. Yes to being Benjamin's mother. Yes to the family we will build together." As Evan kissed the woman he loved while their son slept soundly in his arms, he realized that sometimes the most beautiful love stories start in unexpected ways. The best things in life can come from facing fears and being brave. And when you fight for love, love can fight back even stronger. They were home,